So, welcome everyone today, Morbid fans. We are having a very special guest today on Morbid Planet. We have a scholar slash of religious studies, I guess, vampirologist, a little bit of everything. I would like to introduce to everyone Jay Gordon Melton, who is joining us from Texas today. So, hi, how's it going in Texas?
It's going great. It's a rainy day, and in Texas, particularly Central Texas, this time of year, you love the rain because we've kind of gone through the summer period where we didn't have any rain. So we are
Yeah,
we got good weather. It's raining.
we had that weird heat dome out here that was just insane. I don't know if you saw that in the news.
Oh yes.
I think it was something like they determined later about 600 people died that week because of the heat.
Oh,
So,
I can imagine.
yeah, it's just not heat that we're used to up here, but I know you guys get heat, but us, no.
Yeah, the weird thing about this year then, of course, was the ice storm that we got back in February, because
Oh,
that's something we don't get. It got down to 3 degrees here in Waco,
wow.
and that was really weird. I was snowed in for a week, and I
Oh,
live in the city.
I know. Yeah, you're not too far away from civilization
Yeah.
where your house is. Um, so I'm going to start and just ask for a lot of our viewers that aren't familiar with your work. Can you explain exactly what you do and about your interests?
Well, basically, I'm a religious studies scholar. I'm a church historian, and I do most of my work in religious studies. I've written probably 50 books along the way, and 40 of them at least are in American religion. But along the way, I got into doing reference books. So I was uh, kind of trained by a librarian. I worked my way through school in the library
Okay.
at several schools that I attended. And one of the librarians along the way said, if you want to build any field of study, you have to have a set of reference books that contain the knowledge of the field and summarize it and become the base from which further work can be done. And it's just so happened that during my career, I was able to do that for new religions.
Okay.
And that's been my area of expertise. And so I've developed a set of reference books specifically designed for new religious studies. Then along the way, I, as a hobby, have since my teen years been a fan of vampires. And the same company that produced my reference books in religion said, is there anything else you'd like to do? And in the early 90s, I'm sitting around saying, you can write anything you want to and about vampires and get away with it. We need some real work, real reference books to help build this new field of vampire studies and Dracula studies that was being born in the 70s and 80s. So I did the first edition of a book that then was called The Vampire Book. And then I did a book on vampire movies and a book on vampire characters and the kinds of things that different people in the field. Vampire studies is a very diverse field. You have uh, everything from sociologists and historians on the one hand to film studies people, Gothic literary scholars. It's a real diverse field. So we needed a set of reference books that could deal with all those different kinds of things. And the Vampire Almanac is simply the the latest version of the main vampire source book.
Okay. And let's go way back, just because again, I like to ask different things. What were
Mm-hmm.
you like as a kid? Were you were you like totally into books? Were you creative? Like, what were you like as a kid growing up?
I grew up in Alabama, so
Okay.
I'm totally into football. I am a great football fan. My family's from Tuscaloosa, so we're all University of Alabama people. Roll Tide. Um, no, I was a kid who grew up wanting to be an athlete,
Okay.
wanting to be out there playing football or baseball or something, but I was small.
Oh,
I was all through my grammar school years, I was always the shortest, smallest kid in the class.
I was the
I was,
shortest too. I understand your pain.
yeah, I was always the last or the next to the last person to be chosen for any team that we were putting together. And it became quite obvious to me early on that sports was not my thing. So I happened to be a half decent student and got into studies very early. I'm a collector, as you know,
Oh yeah.
and so I got in at one point. By the time I finished high school, I was into collecting books. I
Okay.
grew up during the paperback revolution. If you can remember when you could buy a book for a dime or 15 cents. And every day after school, I would go over to the drugstore across from the high school I attended and buy a book and read it on the way home because I had a 45-minute trip to get from my school to my home. I lived out on the very edge of Birmingham
Okay.
growing up. And so I began to collect books, and history was my first choice. I I had a marvelous collection of paperbacks on World War II history, and then went from there on into writing about different religious groups and got particularly interested in the odd ones. And then I started in terms of fiction. I started with science fiction, moved to horror, and then discovered vampires.
Okay. And because most people that I talk to in this field who's like a vampire fan, a horror fan, whatever kind of turns their crank for it, a lot of people have that I've talked to like that aha moment where something just pops to them. Like for me, it was in high school when I first picked up The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice. Do you have like an aha moment regarding religion and regarding vampires, just because you do both fields?
Well, with religion, my aha moment was, I guess you could say, my born again experience. I was a member of a fairly large congregation. We had a great pastor when I was a teenager, and I had my moment of kind of evangelical conversion, I guess you could say. It was at that moment I also decided I wanted to be a teacher. And so my aha moment religiously was also vocation wise one of deciding to do that. The aha moment, and this stands in stark contrast, um, was seeing the first of the Hammer movies.
Okay.
Um, I saw those in the theater. I'm old enough to have done that.
Nice.
And so it would have been in 58, 59 when that show came to Birmingham. The Hammer movies always played at what was called the Lyric Theater
Okay.
in downtown Birmingham. And I can remember I had seen Dracula as a rerun on black and white television at that point and had seen The Son of Dracula. But to see these color movies
Yeah.
that Hammer had made, that was kind of my aha moment. And it was about that time that I had also read my first vampire novels.
Okay.
And I did not read Dracula first. I saw it first, but it was only later when I was in college that I read Dracula. Actually, I started reading it 2 or 3 times before I actually sat down and said, I got to get through these first chapters
Yeah.
and get on into the plot of the story. Um, uh, Stoker spends a lot of time introducing his storyline, and you got to get the chapter 3 or 4
I
before.
know I struggled with that so much when I actually sat down a few years ago to read it, and it was hard. I had to like plow my way through. I'm like, I can do this, I can do this, and I did write a
Well,
review of it, but I wasn't a big fan after
yeah,
it.
once you get into it, and especially once the story makes that shift back to England,
Yeah,
then it moves along rather quickly and very nicely. But some of the background material on Transylvania is not as exciting as a young college kid wants.
exactly. Um, so we talked a little bit about your reference materials, and you seem to have such a knack for writing encyclopedias, because I found that there's the Encyclopedia of American Religions, the Encyclopedia of Occultism and Parapsychology, Encyclopedia of Religious Phenomena, and then you've got, of course, your vampire book, the Encyclopedia of the Undead, which this, as everyone can see, is a very big book. And I even have this one as well, which I believe you were talking about earlier, the Vampire
Yes.
Gallery. So I've got that one as well. And then we have the latest one, your newest one, the Vampire Almanac. So I'm sure I've missed some at some point because you've written so many things, but writing books like this that are so detailed with so many entries, what's your process for such a huge project, and how long does one take you to do?
If you talk to a publisher about writing reference books, they'll tell you that half the work is building the table of contents.
Okay.
Uh, to write vampire books, or to write any reference book, you've got to be able to step back and to look at the field broadly, and
Yeah.
to say you're going to build an encyclopedia or you're going to build a biographical dictionary. So you want to cover the whole field,
Yeah.
and you want to be unprejudicial in your coverage. And this is why so many of my scholarly colleagues who want to get into the business of writing reference books don't succeed,
Okay.
because they know very well their little niche of the
Yeah.
market, so to speak, and they know their prejudices, what's the good stuff and what's not so good. So they tend to leave out the not so good stuff. And so anyone using the book is looking for that stuff too. So I've created, I'm able to step back and look at the whole field
Yeah.
and not regard my likes and dislikes, and to try to give adequate coverage to everybody. I tell people I hope that you could look at the chapter on scholars and not know from the reference book which ones I like, which ones I'm not
Okay.
as
Yeah.
favorable to. And look at the pop culture chapter and say, here are my friends, here are also my enemies. But you, I hope, will not be able to come away and know which are which.
Okay.
So I don't give extra credit to you because you're my friend, and I don't take away credit from other people who I might not like as much. Um, it's that's the kind of thing. And then to be able to cover the whole field, you've got to have a knowledge broadly of the field.
Hmm.
Uh, encyclopedia writers and editors are generalists
Yeah.
at best, if they do their job right. And we glory in the fact that we have this kind of general knowledge across the field, and that's what allowed me to do that. I think I've written um, now a dozen encyclopedias,
Okay. That was one of
and
my other questions, is how many are you up to now?
yeah, it's somewhere along that line. The one that you mentioned, for example, that Encyclopedia of Occultism
Yeah.
that I did, this became, and I wasn't consciously doing it, but it became one of the basic building blocks of the field of esoteric studies.
Oh, okay.
I remember going to an esoteric conference after that book came out, and was hearing all kinds of nice things being said about me. Um, and I wasn't aware that I had done anything, but this became one of the major reference books that helped that field get off the ground.
Nice.
And so very, very nice about that. I did a couple that just for the fun of it, but the those three, my Encyclopedia of American Religions, the Occultism, Vampire book, those three I'm very, very proud of, that I was able to work on them and to work. I met so many nice people doing them.
Oh, I
That
can
was one
imagine.
of the other things.
You've probably
And
reached out to so many different people and just have a vast network at this point.
well, it was that. It was going to conferences, carrying on correspondence along the way, and that was what did it. The well, when we were in Dublin, for example, I got to finally meet Bill Hughes,
Yes.
and that has had so many connections. Bill is in Hong Kong or Macau.
Oh,
He's living in China, and that I've been going to China off and on for 20 years, and you meet up with people in all kinds of interesting places that you never expected.
this is
And
why we need you on Facebook, because there's so many people, like even from the Congress in Dublin, that I keep track of or keep in touch with on Facebook. Because
yeah,
it's
I've just been corresponding with Hans
yeah,
and about his new book that's coming out. So
yeah, he's very active on Facebook actually. He likes to post things. And when you do one of your encyclopedias, how long does it take you? Is it like a couple years? Is it like, I guess each one's different probably.
it is. This vampire one did not take as long as some of the others because it's built on previous work.
Hmm.
To start from scratch, to build the table of contents, to deal with the publisher and get a contract, and then to actually do it is usually it's a 2-year project
Okay.
at best.
Yeah.
If you a book the size of the vampire book, if I had to start from scratch and do it, be at least 2 years.
Wow. Okay.
When we did the first one, we signed the contract in '92, and it came out in '94. So, yeah, it was 2 years in the making.
I was always curious because I know like how I talk to people who write fiction or other things and how long that takes them. And I'm like, there's so much research that has to obviously go into these. So,
Well, the thing about vampires, or not about reference books, is that they have to be authoritative.
mhm.
You're not allowed to make mistakes. You can get crucified for too many typos, and this kind of thing. Uh, I'm very fortunate in that I work for the largest reference book company in the world.
Yes.
And I have good editors and backup people. And so I give my editors and my proofreaders and the backup people a lot of credit
Yeah.
for my success, because without them, I don't know what I would have done. I still don't type very well. I tell people I use the Columbus method, as I take my two little fingers and I
Yeah.
search around and then land on the key.
You need to use that dictation that you can do now where I don't know if you've ever tried it, where you
I
talk
have.
and then it types for you. It's interesting.
Yeah, my friend Massimo in Trevina, uh, he was a wealthy lawyer when he first got started in writing his book, and he does much of his writing that way.
Okay.
And but then he had a secretary to transcribe it before computers came along, and but now we don't have secretaries.
No, I know everything has changed. So, in regards to your Vampire Almanac, can you explain to us how it differs from the original, your vampire book, the Encyclopedia of the Undead?
Certainly, the major difference is the organization of the entries.
Okay.
The vampire book is a straight A to Z encyclopedia,
Okay.
and so everything is organized in an alphabetical order.
Yeah.
In the Vampire Almanac, we decided to organize things according to half dozen or a dozen topics. So we start with history and folklore, then we move to scholarship, and then we move to literature and movies and to pop culture. So we've got those kind of controlling things. So we're able to group things together. For example, in the literature section, we have a section on Anne Rice. So we're able to group all of the entries on Anne Rice and her writings together, and instead of having them scattered through the vampire book the way it was.
Yeah.
We have all the Buffy entries together and all the Twilight entries together. Each of these topics have a multiple set of entries. So you started with Anne Rice. You ran into a number of characters. There's Lewis and there's Claudia and there's Lestat and the like. So we now have all those entries grouped in one place. It works out very nicely because one of the nice things about it is we have a chapter that's all of the contemporary novelists, and they are together, so you can look at them all at once and see which one would I like to follow up on.
It'd be easier to explore it. You can just open it up and it's like, oh, I haven't heard of this. Oh, I should give this one a try or look them up. Or do you in regards to the format change and everything, are you still liking your original better, or are you liking the almanac now, or do you have a preference?
I like both of them. Both of them do separate things, and the fact that the earlier editions were alpha oriented, I think for the time that was very important. And it worked well. We're far enough along now to where this one serves a purpose, and particularly for people who are entering into things. I have to remember the vampire studies doesn't get started till 1970. Actually, 1972 is when we date it from the early book on Dracula that Raymond McNally and his colleague did. There wasn't that much to learn. You could read 3 books and you could get up and going in the field. Today, it's a lot different. It's a vast field now. We have authors who are turning out dozens of novels. Just one author, Laurel Hamilton or Chelsea Quinn Yarborough. The number of books, I have now 6 entire bookcases with nothing but nonfiction books. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, six bookcases just with nonfiction books. I have a wall with editions of Dracula.
I know I was going to ask about
900 copies of Dracula here now, so that it's a vast field, and for somebody who's just getting into it, that's what the rationale behind the organization of the almanac is. So you can get into it and not be overwhelmed.
No, I like that, and I think that's I know, like, when I originally met you down in Texas, was there at the Vampire Symposium, and
Yes.
that's when we first met. And then out in Dublin, we went to Vampire Congress out there. And since I started doing that in about 2015 and talking to different scholars and different people and networking on Facebook, that's one of the things is when I talk to them, it's definitely, I'm not on the same level as a lot of them because I'm not a scholar. I like pop culture and other things like that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when you start talking with people that are classified as scholars because a book like this, yes, it would help because it kind of gives everyone and brings it all together. That's what I think, as
Right.
opposed to, going to talk about something that's way over your head, but this kind of brings it down to a little bit easier level where I think a regular person to pick it up and look at it and buy it, as opposed to this one, which is amazing, but yes, it's a lot.
Yeah. That one that you just showed, that is the biggest, baddest version of the vampire book.
I actually
Um,
have another one on my bookshelf, and I was looking at them last night, and I'm like, why is this one a lot smaller? And it's, about 2/3 of the size. And then I
yeah.
was checking, I'm like, no, they're both third editions. So yeah, I do have another one up there on my shelf.
Well, what happened along the way? I get a call from the publisher after that third edition volume has come out, and he says, "Gordon, we're going to do a translation of the book.
Okay.
Uh, we need a copy of. We need an edition that's half the size of the present one. So we need for you to go through and select which half are we going to keep."
Chop.
Chop. So I literally had to spend a week going through and making decisions on what to cut out
Okay.
and come up with a book that was half the size. It got translated into Chinese. It got translated into Portuguese, a couple other languages, I think.
Wow.
And then that translation became the basis for doing the new edition. So
Hmm.
we started from a book half the size,
Yeah.
uh, and then added all of the material about the 21st century. And so the material covering pop culture. And I would say that pop culture is very, very important. If it wasn't for pop culture, we would not have vampire studies.
Hmm.
And it's fact most people who are into vampire studies are also themselves fans.
Yeah.
We love vampire novels, we love vampire movies, and we love all the popular culture. My house is full of vampire
Have so
toys and
much.
statues and those kinds of things. And we all have Halloween as our favorite holiday, and we get to dress up. I get to put on my vampire cape and put some plastic fangs in my mouth and run around, even show up at the office this way.
Nice. Nice. And speaking of things that you love, um, do you have a specific book over the years that you've written? I don't know if it's your vampire encyclopedia, but which is one that you would say is your labor of love? Which was the most one you're just proudest of at this point?
At this point, it's my book on African American Methodism.
Okay.
Uh, the this was a book I spent literally 30 years
Wow.
writing. I started back when I was a grad student. I came from Alabama. I went to Chicago to do my seminary work. I'm
Mhm.
a Methodist minister along the way. And when I took the first course in American Methodism, um, toward the end of the course, I asked my professor, I said, why don't you spend more time talking about African American Methodist? The whole course is built around white Methodists. And I had just come from the Selma March and, all the things that were going on, and Black Methodism was very important. He said, Gordon, we don't have enough material for me to do a set of lectures on Black Methodism. And I said, that can't be right. And the next day I go into the library, and our seminary had one of the best collections of Methodism in the country.
Okay.
And I look around, he's right. There were 3 articles. That
Wow.
was it, you know. Um, and so I said, I've got to do this book. So I started collecting material, and sure enough, collecting the material took a long time.
Yeah.
And I wound up visiting most of the Methodist seminaries around the country. I collected material for years and years. I moved out to California. I was at the University of California. So collecting material meant going back east.
Yeah.
So I would take my holidays. I remember one holiday I spent in the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
Okay.
Went to Dorchester, where Carrot Tubman is from, and Frederick Douglass lived just north of Dorchester during his slave years, and he became a Methodist when he was in Baltimore. So, I spent a whole week just going around visiting the places that you can now see in the movie about Harriet Tubman,
Yeah.
and the churches there. That this was an area where over half of the residents were Methodist, and 2/3 of those were Black Methodist. So when the book finally came out, it was the first book in Black Methodist history that was about Black Methodist and not about white Methodist and what they thought about Black Methodist.
Okay.
There had been a set of books written about Methodist attitudes toward slavery and Methodist attitudes toward um, Black people and how they structured the membership in the Methodist Church and this sort of thing. This was the first book that really told the story of Black Methodists, and they were the major players, and the white Methodists were lookers on. And
30
I'm
years.
very, very proud of it. It won a couple of awards for me, and most importantly, my fellow Methodist scholars recognized it, and their words, formal and informal, of congratulations for doing it,
That's amazing.
were quite warming. It's a little niche area
Yeah.
of things. There are, a few million Black Methodists in America. So it's not the greatest work on George Washington or the Civil War or
Yeah.
something, but it was for me a very, very rewarding bit of work over the years, and I was finally glad when I got a chance to sit down and actually write the book. It came out about 15 years ago.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And when we're talking about books, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but you have a massive vampire book collection. And for a lot of our viewers that don't know, I've actually been to Gordon's house. I've had a tour, I've seen everything. And it's almost like I have photos too, which maybe at some point, if you want to do a virtual tour with us, we could. But
you should do that.
Would you do a virtual tour with me?
Because you can't do it anymore. You couldn't come here and see it anymore.
Oh, I know. But how many books in your entire collection do you think at this point? I know you said about 6,000 for fiction. How many books do you think you have in your whole collection? If you
I think the entire collection at one point probably hit about 18 to 20,000.
Wow.
And
in the collection, what kind of vampire books, just so everyone knows, do you have in there? Like, are we talking fiction, nonfiction, comics, or just like everything?
it was everything. I had 10,000 comics.
Wow.
And I put that, if you may have noticed, in the past tense. I had 10,000 comics. We had and still have here almost all of the books published by White Wolf about the Vampire Masquerade game.
Okay.
That fills one bookcase, just
Wow.
those books. Uh, with books on art, of course, the vampire studies books that cover folklore and
Mhm.
Dracula and history and the like. Children's books. Uh, I had at one point 4 bookcases full of just books on from children's literature.
Mhm.
Well, it went from pre-reader, the first board books.
Yeah.
You know, there was one called Let's Count Dracula.
I remember in Dublin when we went to that bookshop, I believe you bought one as well as I did, was I got like a vampire kids book that was full of stickers.
Yes,
You could put the little stickers around and
right.
it was fun to play with. But
Yeah, but we have game books, humor books, joke books,
yeah.
drama, uh, and then of course we had the big vampire communities, the Dark Shadows community.
Hmm.
I came home as a teenager to watch Dark Shadows. Rarely could make it home in time. Say it was 45 minutes to get home, but made it up in the summer for the when they did the reruns. So
That's
that's
one show I've never watched yet. I've never
oh you
watched.
should. At least the movies and the 3 movies and the Ben Cross uh,
Okay.
version, which revamps the original story line. You could get through those. It would take you a long time to get through the the original series.
I watched what was it I watched? It was a bad reboot of, I think it was Johnny Depp that played Barnabas Collins.
Yeah, the last of the movies.
Yeah, it wasn't.
That will assure us that we will not have another one. You may remember in that movie, well, maybe not because you didn't see the original, is the famous cameos by the original stars from
Oh,
the
okay.
early
No.
television. In the ballroom scene,
Yeah.
as they're having they open the door to let in some latecomers, and the people who come in are 4 of the original stars
Oh,
of the Leanne Scott and Laura Parker, and of course Barnabas himself from the original movie. And he had died by the time the movie came out. Between the filming and when the movie came out, Fred
I'll have
had
to
died.
I'll have to add that to my list of stuff to see because I
Yeah.
know it's one of those ones I've never got around to watching, but I
Well,
hear a lot of people praise it.
when you do it, remember the ballroom scene, and so that those people coming in who are older, and I mean, you know that that
Yeah.
will be one of the things you'll notice about them is that they are older than the rest of the attendees are that, and that's the reason why. But they do get to make that cameo. They have waited for it long enough.
And do you also, I think I remember at your house, you also had a large collection of vampire DVDs as well, didn't you?
I do. I've got a little over 1,000 vampire DVDs and VHS tapes, and
Okay.
still faithfully watch them as I move along. There are a few of them I haven't seen yet. There are a few of them that I started watching and said, this is really challenging my idea that any movie with a vampire is better than any movie without one. And there's some pretty bad vampire movies out there.
Most of the time with a film, I'll like watch it all the way through, even if it's, about, but if it's super bad, then I'll just feel like, no, I shut it off. But it's not very often that it
Yeah.
gets me to that point where I have to shut this off. I can't.
Well, every once in a while you run into one that's so bad it's good, but there are some that are just boring. The indie movies usually have bad acting, but are great for their storyline.
Yeah.
There's some very bad movies that have been amateurish in their acting, but have unique and really creative, innovative storylines. But every once in a while, when you get one that's bad acting and no storyline worth it,
It's just
uh,
doom.
yeah. But
Um,
I do. I should say, and you I think are aware of this, that I'm in process of donating my collection to San Diego State University.
okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
all of the comic books are in San Diego now, and actually are ready for viewing.
Wow.
We have
Okay.
the Juvenilia has gone. We are in the process just this fall.
Yeah.
We will send the short story anthologies, the gaming books. Um, oh, what else are we going to? Those are the main things. Next year we'll start sending down the fiction,
Okay.
the novels.
So anyone who's out by that school, definitely a good opportunity. That,
San Diego State is a great place. They have a fabulous popular culture collection. They have a huge collection of romance books, for
those aren't my
example.
cup of tea, but wow. Okay.
Their science fiction collection is outstanding.
Mhm.
Ed Marsh gave the collection, and they now have in special collections an Ed Marsh room where you can see a lot of the stuff he did. But the they have not only books but letters, a lot of the Forey Ackerman stuff. Uh, Ed bought up a chunk of Forey Ackerman's collection before he died. So it was a great place to put it, and they wanted the collection. So we're in the process slowly of it'll probably take 3 or 4 more years before the whole collection is there. Um, the um, so that's where we're at right now.
Okay. And I know one aspect of your book collection, because I remember it in a separate shelf, was that you have multiple editions of Dracula. How many different editions at this point do you have? And I guess because they're all different values, and what's the most you paid for one, or what's the most valuable one that you have in your collection?
Uh, the single most valuable one is my first edition of Dracula,
Okay.
which I back then paid $4,000 for, and the I now have some fairly valuable ones that I have a first edition of Anne Rice,
Mhm.
uh, of Interview. Uh, although collectors will know this, that Interview is not the most valuable. The first edition of Interview is not the most valuable. It's actually a second printing that was done as a souvenir edition, and there were only about 1,000 copies available. It's never been on the marketplace, but that now is recognized as the single most valuable
Mm.
copy. I do have first editions now of all of her vampire books, and all but two of them are signed.
Okay.
So, um, again, some of her uh, later titles, the first editions were not the Knopf edition; it was the Garden City bookstore edition that came out of New Orleans,
Okay.
which is a fancy boxed slipcase edition. And so there are maybe 4 or 5 of the books at the height of her fame, right after the movie came out.
Yeah.
That Garden City bookstore there was a couple blocks from her home, uh, put out special editions, and those actually came out before the Knopf edition. So they are the first editions.
Okay. Okay. And I know just because things are a little bit different now with COVID and lack of traveling, because I know before you traveled a lot, um, and you always would pick up books along the way as you went. During COVID, with everybody being more at home and stuff, have you still been able to collect? And are you like buying things online now? Or is it one of those things where you're just kind of waiting till you get to go back to travel and you can pick stuff up again like you used to?
Uh, the amount of intake has gone down considerably with my not being on the road, but I have been able to spend time mining the used bookstores online and Amazon and keeping up with things. So I still am bringing books in. I maybe added 100 titles to the collection
Okay.
in the past year. Uh, I would get out to our local bookstores, and up in Dallas, there's a fine set of used bookstores in Dallas. And one of the things I found that I didn't want to buy online were some of the pod editions, publish on demand editions.
Yeah.
And so I picked up 5 or 6 copies of Dracula that were pod editions, and which I didn't want to pay full price for because they're not the greatest editions. But I picked up some very, very fine copies. There have been some fabulous special editions. I got one from Croatia,
Oh,
all places, and which had a red cloth cover,
nice.
really beautiful. And the Centipede Press uh, did 2 editions
Hmm.
over the last few years, and they are about to come out with 2 editions of poster books. Next year is the centennial of Nosferatu,
Yes.
1922. So we're planning a couple of special events for that, of showings with some top-rate uh, Wurlitzer musicians who
Nice.
can do their own soundtracks to it and live performances. But Centipede Press is going to come out with 2 large, oversized editions of Dracula posters,
That would
movie.
be really interesting to see, actually.
The one will be all Nosferatu, and the other will be kind of a history of Dracula movies. There are 45, 46 versions of Dracula. It's the novel that has most frequently been brought to the screen.
Wow.
So there are 46 remakes of Dracula. And
That's amazing.
so the movie posters for those, some of them came out, as from small publishers, and there are 3 or 4 porn editions and this kind of thing. But there's going to be a good set of posters. I'm going to write the introduction for one of the volumes. I think David Scall is going to write the other.
Oh, okay.
And that's going to be something to watch for again. But
Okay.
the collection does keep growing, and the among the most recent additions are coloring books. Adult coloring books have become quite a thing, and there's a set of vampire-oriented coloring books, like 5 Buffy coloring books.
I have a couple adult ones, but I got more like the horror genre ones. So
Mhm.
those ones I do have a few, but I know sometimes like when I'm out and about at the store and I saw like I think the other day it was at the grocery store of all places and it had like this kid's book that was like vampire type and I was like, I wonder if you have that, but then I wasn't sure.
Well, today, this morning, when I went grocery shopping, Time Life put out a new book on vampires. That
Oh,
was at the grocery that
I'll have to
was
look
at
at
the
that. I didn't
check-in.
see it.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, it just came out. It wasn't there last week.
Oh,
And
okay.
so literally, it's a brand new thing for Halloween this year. Um,
So you
so
scooped
there,
yourself a copy, right?
yes,
Yes.
I grabbed a copy. Well, those are the kinds of things that most copies go the way of the world, and the ones that survive are overpriced on eBay.
Yes, because then people are trying to flog them years
Yes,
later and it's like nobody kept them, right? So,
right.
um, normally I know that you do so much traveling because a lot of times before COVID again, it's really hard to catch you when you're actually at home. Can you tell all of our viewers, what do you travel so much for? What do you do?
Uh, I spent a number of years as an independent scholar before I landed my cushy jobs teaching, and I got used to going to conferences
Okay.
and to uh, I had to travel to do my research.
Yeah.
I actually believe you go out and do research these days and don't just mind um, internet files.
Sit in front of
Uh,
the screen for hours and hours.
right, and I enjoyed traveling. So um, uh, I have tried to 2 days a week to be out in the field on the
Okay.
average, um, and so what that amounted to is I wound up anywhere from 80 to 100 days each year on the road, and uh, would had to cobble together funds to do that, but I got used to doing it, and the it came to an abrupt end last May,
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
or last March a year ago, and I've I am this week going to San Diego to
Okay.
meet with the folks there that I've been working with at the university, and then week after next I'm going to Portland. And
You'll be
the
closer to me.
yes, uh, unfortunately because of COVID, I'm not going to be able to
I know.
do anything other. See, I would normally fly to Portland. I would then go up to the Seattle area for a few days. Then I would come on to Vancouver for a day or two,
I know,
and
I'm sad.
uh, that was the whole plan. And because of COVID, I fly to Portland, do my conference, and fly right back home.
Yeah.
And
That's okay. We'll get it at some point when everything's good. Like I got one of the mixed vaccinations, so according to the states, I can't even go there anyway if we were allowed to. So I'm kind of stuck here at this point. Um, so if you've done when you do all your traveling and stuff, and then you get downtime at home, what's your favorite thing to do to just, relax, chill out?
uh, I've become somewhat of a couch potato. Uh, I've gotten really into British mysteries.
Okay.
Uh, I think I have watched the entire 120 episodes of Midsummer Mysteries,
Wow.
and
You binge hard.
the so I'm really into that, and uh, I'm fortunate now. My granddaughter has come to live with me,
Yeah.
and she's enrolled at the university this year. So uh, she has become the joy of my life for the present, and it's really nice getting to know her at a level that I wasn't while she was growing up, and so uh, and I've got my friends, and I'm still a full-time university professor.
Yes.
So
Busy.
I go to the office every day and spend the mornings there doing my university work and my uh, work with my colleagues and uh, my research and writing.
Okay. And at this point, is there something that you can say is the hardest thing that you've had to overcome in your life? Is there something that was, really challenging for you? And
In all honesty, not really. Um, uh, I grew up in a nice middle class home. Uh, my parents did not abuse me. They loved me and nurtured me. I got to go to a first rate college,
yeah,
um, and then on to graduate school and do my master's and my PhD. Um, I graduated at a time where jobs in my field were at a premium,
yeah,
and so I did spend a block of time as an independent scholar, and I had to work to keep my scholarly credentials together and to do good scholarly work, while it was always tempting to do non-scholarly work that paid better.
Yeah,
But other than that, I've been fortunate. I've been healthy most of my life.
that's good.
Uh, uh, there were never racked up a lot of money, but
That's okay. Money's not everything.
only went bankrupt twice, and and recovered quickly for both times. So no, I would have to say that in the way that others have answered that question,
Yeah,
I would have to say no. I did not have. I had a lot of small obstacles,
yeah, yeah.
not
Little
uh,
speed bumps.
not the big one that had to be overcome.
Okay.
Um, and
Is there a fun fact that not many people know about you? I like to
probably
ask this one because I've got some weird answers.
uh, probably, but I don't know one to pull up right off the bat. I have had I've had a pretty interesting life, at least for me. I've never been bored in my life. Uh, I've visited some of the most interesting places in the world. I've certainly met a slew of the most interesting people in the world simply in my line of
How
work. And
how about one of the most about instead the most interesting place you've visited since you've been all over the place? Again, I know it's hard.
it it is. I Several years ago, I got to go to the Matsu Temple in Taiwan.
Okay.
Matsu is a traditional deity out of China. She was supposedly a very real person who was a maiden who lived 1,000 years ago. Refused to get married. Her father was trying to force her into a marriage, and she just refused it, uh, and wound up dead because of it, uh, and became a hero. Interestingly enough, became the goddess of fishermen.
Oh, okay.
So all of her temples are built close to water, and the uh, the biggest temples to Matsu uh, are in Taiwan now, and along the coast on the western side of the island. And I got to visit one. Had a fortune teller give me a reading,
Oh,
and have two coins now that are sitting on the shelf in my living room that I brought back as souvenirs.
that's cool. Um, a few more here and then we're almost done is I guess if you had to pick your favorite series or franchise in vampire pop culture, what would be your favorite one and why?
Uh, it would have to be Buffy.
Okay.
I'm a complete rabid Buffy fan, and the I can still remember we did the Dracula Centennial in L.A. in '97, and we sort of said, well, that's going to be it for a while.
Yeah.
And then, a few months later, the Buffy series started. We didn't have much hope for it because we had all seen the '92 movie, and that movie was mixed at best. And and we got into watching it. Um, I was fortunate at that point. I was into to vampire studies already, so when it came up from the beginning, we watched it as observers to a phenomenon.
Mhm.
And when it took off, we were already collecting the material and saving the stuff. The original collectibles for Buffy were the advertisements in TV Guide. That
Oh,
was
okay.
the original thing you could have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I remember
I got
TV Guide as a kid. My mom would read it and we'd get it each.
so I have those old TV guides that had the original, not just the cover, the two first cover editions that did
Mhm.
had Buffy and Angel on cover. Those are valuable collectibles right now. I got to go to the first Buffy conference in England,
Yeah.
and I remember I had a Buffy T-shirt by that time, and I wore my Buffy T-shirt around at the conference, and all the British folks were very envious because they couldn't get Buffy T-shirts at that time. Uh, but I became a total Buffy fan, and our comic book store in Santa Barbara, where I lived at the time, were uh, every season at the end of the season
Hmm.
brought the cast out for autographs session.
Nice.
So, I still have all my autographs and everything.
Yeah.
And I was a complete collector.
I'm
Um,
not a huge Buffy fan, but that's again on Facebook with networking. Juliet Lando that played Drusilla, she's
right.
actually friends on Facebook with me. So
Oh,
I've
yeah.
met her when she and her husband came to Vancouver. It was a couple years ago. They were doing a presentation at a makeup show and things like that. So it was really cool, and I've interviewed her and stuff. But yeah, so there's another networking, So met someone from Buffy, which was kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, it was great. We got to meet all the cast,
Yeah,
and I, except for Buffy, Angel, and Cordelia.
yeah.
Those were the three that never made the events and never interacted with the public.
Well, the
Yeah.
one when they did the makeup show, it was like a 45-minute presentation, and they had artists who worked on the show as well. And what I really liked was the fact that you could hear about the stories of things that like kind of went on behind the scenes
Yes.
they were filming. So that was really cool. I enjoyed that. Um, so my last question is at this point, because you've been around for so many generations and seen how the genre has just evolved, where do you think in the next, say, 10 years, the genre will be? Because I know recently we've obviously had huge franchises like Twilight and Vampire Diaries and True Blood and everything that's, affected the pop culture in that sense. Where do you think it's going to be in like the next 10 years or so?
I don't know. The obvious trends right now are downward. Um, we do not have the on the horizon the next Twilight and
Yeah.
Buffy or Saint Germain, etc. I'm confident that those will arise. We're still getting a good number of comic books being produced in the vampire genre.
Hmm.
Uh, the number of novels has not slowed down.
Yeah.
Um, we still have a few of the novelists who are writing multi-volume series who are still going. Uh, we, Vampire's still popular on television, and we've still got television series that are current. And uh, actually, just in the past year, at one point there were 5 television vampire series on American television,
Yeah.
and
Well, and you
so
have Netflix and things like that now where it's stuff's coming out on there all the time. And
and they are keeping the older stuff alive for new
yeah.
audiences. So that's very important. But I don't see the next big thing along the way.
Okay.
Vampire Studies is very interesting. It's got a fabulous future. Um, the amount of new Dracula stuff that has come out since that conference in Dublin that we attended a few years ago,
Yeah.
we've got all of these new foreign editions that turn out to be not just translations of Dracula,
Hmm.
but a real revision of the story.
Yeah, they were
Uh,
different.
we discovered new early printings of Dracula. We finally found the newspaper editions.
Mhm.
So Dracula studies, vampire studies itself, both still have a lot of work to do. There's a guy named Kevin Dodd who's just
Yeah.
published a book of essays on vampires. These are going to remake vampire studies.
Mhm.
Each of these essays challenges a major assumption that we made in vampire studies, and it's going to take a generation to work through just the work that Kevin's done.
Yeah.
And so
I know
uh,
you also have Anthony's journal that he's on his second issue, I think, as well right now. So
yeah, the first edition is out. The second one hopefully will be out before too long. So we've got plenty. There's going to be plenty for Anthony to keep publishing.
yeah.
The Journal of Dracula is still Dracula Studies is the Transylvanian Society of Dracula uh, journal is still coming out. Um, so the field itself is moving along. The popular culture is moving along, but we just are in between the big thing
Yeah, I think so.
at this moment.
It'll
And
be interesting to see what is the next big thing that, you know,
and I've found that that's completely unpredictable. Uh,
it is.
had no idea that Anne Rice was going to hit, no idea that Buffy was going to hit, no idea that Twilight was going to hit. I mean, if Twilight and Anne Rice are both in the uh, sets of books
Hmm.
that have been most reproduced internationally.
Yeah.
They are, if you imagine 50 sets of books that have been the most circulated worldwide, and in there are the Anne Rice books and the Twilight books.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that's the kind of popularity they've had. But we'll see what the next one is. I think that there are still some creative stories to be written in the vampire genre.
Hmm.
I am not like I was in the mid '90s saying, "Yeah, it's pretty well been exhausted." It hasn't, and that there is still much to be done.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today and answer all my questions. And if people have not picked this up yet, this is something that you should definitely check out. You can buy it online, go to a bookstore. I know with COVID, a lot of people can't go to bookstores right now, but the Vampire Almanac is definitely something that I recommend that people need to
Great
grab a
Christmas
copy.
gift.
Yeah, like, and for everyone else here, thank you for joining me today on Morbid Planet while we were having a discussion with Gordon Melton. It's been amazing. And if you guys haven't subscribed yet to our channel, make sure you do that now so then that way you don't miss future episodes coming up. So otherwise, everyone stay safe and stay morbid. Thank you.